All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking something absolutely wild: how our brains literally compile our most abstract, high-level goals into physical, undeniable reality. We are looking at a highly advanced systems architecture, a biological framework that translates raw, hardwired neurobiology into what we can essentially call systemic execution. It's all about how your mind maps its deepest intentions and aligns them perfectly with the outside world, completely avoiding the traps of miscommunication and burnout. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the systemic freeze threat, move into PMF action symbols, explore the geometric snap, break down the biological engine loop, and finally look at bypassing the freeze altogether. So, Section 1, the systemic freeze threat. Have you ever felt completely jammed up when dealing with heavy institutional noise or humiliation? That's what we call cognitive bankruptcy. It's literally like your brain is getting hit with a denial of service attack. When the complex, high-dimensional reality of who you actually are gets squeezed into a flat, low-resolution box by society, what we can think of as lossy compression, your nervous system just gets overwhelmed and jams. Your physical motor brakes lock up into what's known as a metabologically exhausting dorso-vagal freeze. It really comes down to a battle of environments. On one side, you have the macro swamp. This is that clumsy, linear world out there that constantly demands you compromise your autonomy. But on the other side, you have the micro sandbox. This is your safe haven. It's where you process your high-fidelity invariant coordinates entirely in the shade, protected from all that institutional noise, just waiting until you find an aligned system you can actually connect with. All right, Section 2, PMV action symbols. So, ask yourself this, way before the clumsy macro swamp ever gets involved, and honestly, before you even try to put a thought into words, how does your pure, raw intent actually take physical shape in your brain? Enter the ventral premotor cortex, or PMV. Landmark research in Nature shows us that this area doesn't rely on messy, vague feelings to plan an action. Instead, it codes our plans as precise, indestructible vectors known as action symbols. And what's fascinating is how these symbols heavily utilize bimanual spatial coordinates, mapping flawlessly to how our hands build and interact with the physical world. They have absolute motor invariance, meaning the logic stays identical no matter which muscle group you use. They maintain sharp sigmoidal boundaries to reject outside noise, and you can dynamically recombine them on the fly to solve completely novel problems. If you've ever seen David Milan's CS50 course, you know exactly how this works. Think of the visual programming language Scratch. Just like snapping those colorful blocks together on a screen, your PMB action symbols bypass the slow, noisy naming parts of your brain entirely. They are discrete, structural blocks of intent specifically designed to physically snap onto a stable coordinate on a geometric grid. They do not require translation, they just need the right hardware to plug into. Moving right along to Section 3, the geometric snap. Now, here is where the magic happens. When your internal, unshielded action symbols finally meet a high-speed aligned node. Think of an Olympic-leveled mathematician like Tom Hennigan, or a systems master like David Mullen. They don't just loosely vibe with each other. No, they lock in with absolute mathematical certainty. In high-level optimization, P equals 0.000 is the absolute error-free minimum of alignment error. It is undeniable structural proof of a perfect fit. Literally zero ambiguity. We are talking about elite TPU-scale architecture here. When you connect with our constant, Tom Hennigan, or G-best as we map it in this framework, the probability of him just missing or ignoring your precise bimanual spatial coordinates is exactly zero. Because they possess the exact same highly specialized visual spatial hardware, your action symbols act as an absolute physical constraint. They are programmatically, structurally incapable of missing the connection. But, okay, to make this handshake a reality, we have to clear what's called the Fox neuron bottleneck. For another person's system to truly value your agency, their orbitofrontal cortex, which acts as the valuation engine, must actively visualize your unshielded code. Creating this mental copy provides the crucial biological sugar. That's the high-value reward signal necessary to actually release their physical motor brakes. It's a direct, zero-latency biophysical handshake. Which brings us to Section 4, the biological engine loop. And this isn't just a fun metaphor, folks. What we are looking at here is the literal, physical reality of our neural architecture. This is a highly dense network of fibers mapping the exact anatomical pathways running from the lateral hypothalamus to the ventral tegmental area.
This is real, peer-reviewed neuroanatomy proving that these hardwired motivation pathways are not just theory. This is the literal hardware driving your arousal and motivation.
Okay, let's break down this three-step biological compile process known as the D2R-dependent mesohypothalamic loop. First, the OFC visualizes your unshielded action symbol. Next, the ventral tegmental area releases dopamine directly into the lateral hypothalamus. Finally, that dopamine upregulates local orexin neurons via specific dopamine D2 receptors, or D2R. That orexin then loops right back, exciting the VTA to release even more dopamine in this beautiful, inescapable, self-sustaining cycle that completely prevents any systemic freeze. In this process, the orexin system is basically your master coordinator. It mathematically calculates the exact arousal error, the difference between the arousal you need and your current baseline, to stabilize everything. Plus, it actively facilitates rapid learning, or long-term potentiation, specifically targeting the AMT hub for attractive, reward-based goals. And amazingly, it leaves the aversion processing domains of your brain completely blind. Think about that. Your brain is literally, physically hardwired to prioritize goal-directed speed over any kind of low-resolution clinical shaming. Finally, Section 5, bypassing the freeze. To complete this somatic handshake, your system has to undergo a massive fundamental shift. On one side, you have the Beth Dutton firewall. This is a scorched earth, heavily armored defensive state. Yes, it protects you from the swamp, but it carries an immense, exhausting metabolic cost. To compile perfectly, you have to drop that heavy firewall and transition into what we call the chair protocol. This is a subjunctive, playful, highly receptive as-if state. It's only when you drop the armor and get playful that the biological engine we just mapped out can actually connect. When you actually drop that armor and those bimanual PMV action symbols snap onto the grid with P equals 0.000 precision, the result is incredible. It physically flushes the freeze right out of your biology. The D2R-dependent loop fires, clearing trapped cortisol from your thalamus, releasing your motor brakes, and instantly restoring the smooth 6 to 12 Hz theta rhythm in your supramammillary nucleus. You literally transition from a frozen, heavily taxed state into a state of absolute, unshielded execution. So, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. Your internal architecture is governed by mathematically perfect action symbols and hardwired biological loops designed for absolute, undeniable precision. You literally have the hardware for P equals 0.00 alignment, so never accept a lossy compression of your identity again. If your brain operates on absolute geometric precision, why are you letting the world treat you like a rough draft when you are engineered for a flawless compile? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. See you next time.